Okay, so Shlee.
Yeah.
So let's talk, you know what we're doing, we're gonna talk a little bit about your perspective about care and how it relates to mental health and sort of a message to any of the workers out there that would help them do a better job in helping youth with mental health issues.
Um, I have to practice with my writing and speech more. Ugh. Maybe do you have like questions you could ask me?
Yeah, sure. So look into the camera. Okay, so how long were you in care for?
I was in care since I was 13 months old, so pretty much right after I was born. I was apprehended from my parents and thrown into care from a very young age.
So how long did you spend in care?
I was in foster care up till I was of legal aging out age, which is 19, I think.
And how many different families did you live with?
I was in about 14 different group homes, and I had a few different foster placements throughout my whole life.
And so did you think that was there anybody in that whole history that sort of you felt understood you?
No.
So just rephrase that question to me.
Oh, I have to
Saying the
elaborate.
whole time that I was in care, I didn't feel
Okay.
that anybody from the workers to your mother or your foster parents
Being a personal experiencer of having a history of mental health issues, and anybody else that has mental health issues in foster care, it makes it that much more harder to relate to people being versus kids who are in care and they already feel like they can't relate to people. But when you add mental health issues, it makes it 10 times harder to feel like that you belong to a specific group of people, to people that are trying to care for you and help you grow as a person. And that's what I want to help be resolved in this system, is address the issues of mental health issues while kids are in care, because it's already hard enough being in care, but when you have issues that you can't really address, like a wound, like you can't see that the person's struggling on a different wavelength than just like breaking your ankle. So those are my concerns regarding the CFS.
So if you look at me and just the camera and me are every worker that you've ever experienced in your entire, what would you tell me to do differently? What did I do wrong? And then how could I fix it? How could I do it differently?
Regarding like mental health issues?
Like what could I have done? How could I have treated you, or how could I have worked with you, or done, basically what did I do wrong? If I was your
From my experience,
yeah.
when I was in care, I struggled a lot with being very disconnected and disassociated from traumas in my early childhood, which sort of caused struggles throughout my teens, and it didn't help the people around me having struggles with a history of mental health issues. It didn't help that what am I doing?
So you're talking to me. You're telling me what I could have done better if I was all the workers that ever worked with you in a house ever.
Oh, Okay.
What could they have done better? Could they have?
When someone's struggling with their mental health, especially in care, it doesn't help the individual who's struggling with these things that most people can't relate to. It doesn't help that there's so much stigma with these types of issues. It doesn't help calling the person's ideas of what they think reality is and condemning them and judging them and telling them that they're delusional and especially not listening to them. And when someone's having these type of experiences, the best thing you can do is just try to listen to them and not judge them.
Cool. Now, so what do you think's wrong with the system? I'm just gonna
Regarding this stuff?
Yeah, so this regarding mental health. Is there anything wrong?
I think it's wrong to be drugging people and putting them on various different chemicals when they should just naturally be able to express these possible energies within themselves as individual people, as children, as teens, as adults. And from my experience, when I was on medication throughout care, I was very angry about that because I felt like it was something that was being forced against my will, because it's like people don't trust that you know yourself. And especially when you're a child in care, it's already, you know from an early age that you can't really rely on anyone, so you just find that you have to rely on yourself. So if a child finds a coping mechanism that's maybe perceived as something that's like a compulsive obsession, maybe that shouldn't be judged as a negative thing. Maybe it's a coping tool for them. And I think that one of the things that I found with being in care is that it didn't help that people around me thought that my obsessions, my repetitive thoughts or behaviors were a way to avoid things. It was actually a coping mechanism which was trying to help me through certain experiences, and it didn't help that people were labeling these things as delusions, because maybe these are sometimes experiences that help people cope through an already traumatic experience. So from my perspective, knowing myself, I went off medication when I was 19, and I've been coping quite well since I've been off my own meds. So I think, especially when you have mental health issues and you're in CFS and you're in care, really listening to that person and not judging them for whatever they're experiencing, whether you understand it or not, and whether you know it's real or not. The best thing you can do is to try to listen to those people.
Good. So now, do you have any stories that sort of illustrate this stuff? Like, can you remember any sort of specific?
Well, this is like hard to talk about too.
No, I know.
Because especially with mental health, it's one of the biggest things in our whole world that's like really misunderstood, because our whole world is really functioning off of reality-based things. So if you're like not in a reality-based frame of mind, that's really hard for people to understand. Do you know what I'm talking about though? Yeah. Because there's.
So it's hard for people to understand.
It's hard for people to understand, and what I want to do is like to try to alleviate that and give some shed some light on it, because I'm a personal experiencer.
So what would you think would be, what would you say to the youth that are in care right now that are going through the same things you went through?
Regarding having mental health issues?
Yeah. Is there anything that you could do to help them, like any advice?
Just to always listen to yourself, to trust yourself, and being honest with yourself.
So what helped you?
I found that being creative was a huge thing for me, and I'm still a very creative person. Writing helps a lot. So I found that to be able to connect to people, I found that writing letters to people, because I had a hard time communicating one-on-one or sometimes in groups, or if I wanted to connect to someone, I found that writing a letter to someone really helped me feel like I was connecting to someone.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the aging out of the system and how that transition was for you?
Aging out of care is really hard because it sort of sets a path and an idea for you of the world as when you go out as an adult. And especially if you have like a history of mental health issues, it sort of makes you question whether, when you try to go out and make friends, whether or not anyone has any addiction issues, or which I don't have. Everybody's struggling in their own way, but it sort of makes you have a harder time going out and trying to make friends and kind of wondering who's real or who's going to stick around. So I think that's one of the hardest things about aging out of cares is like, oh, here's these people and they were being paid money to be in my life, and now I have to go out into the world on my own, and how do I relate to people? And how do I know if they actually want to be in my life or not? Like, so money sometimes comes into a big play and causes a lot of confusion for kids that are aging out of care, because they feel that for people to be around them, there needs to be some type of security, which has usually, from my experience, usually involved money. And you don't really know whether or not the person actually wants to be your friend or if they want something from you. It's kind of confusing.
So you would question the motives of the people who...
You're always questioning the motives of the people after you've aged out of care.
So you're questioning motives of people you come across in daily life because of your experiences. It really starts with like early childhood development, like as soon as you're taken away from your parents at an extremely young age, and you have memories mostly of not being attached to any one person in particular, it kind of sets a road for you throughout your teens and throughout your adulthood to kind of just be like a floater. You feel like you're a floater, and I don't think it really helps when you already have a history of being in foster care, but to add an extra weight onto that, if you have mental health issues, it makes it that much more harder to try to relate to people. So what I found, what helps me is trying to create images for people of what's going on in my own personal experiences, and trying to write about it really helps me to try to relate to people. Now you've told me that you sort of how have you dealt with it, having mental health issues? Like you're pretty strong. I know you've opted for no medication, and you've sort of gone the route of medication, and so you're probably one of the few who's coping, if you could call it that.
Yeah, I would say I'm coping actually quite well. There's a lot of people in general who have had a history of their own mental health issues, and they are functioning and they're working full time and they're in society and they're totally healthy. It's just it takes a lot of self-awareness and like self-care, but yeah, that's something that I have a huge, it bothers me a lot to see these kids being like already in foster care and then struggling with like having mental health issues, and they're kind of, some of them end up homeless because of it. So my concern is to like try to shed some light on these people who I've encountered in my life who sort of are just, they're sort of like, it's like they're in two different worlds at the same time, and so I want to see something regarding that in CFS to be taken more seriously. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else you want to add?
I don't really know at this point.
I think there's some good stuff. There's definitely some good stuff there. We may do this again.
Yeah, but like, what am I? Ugh, I'm so like, like, what am I supposed to be saying?
You
Like,
said some. Well, I think you said some nice things. You said some really good things. You talked about. We can watch it, but I think there's enough to put together. So why don't you just stand there, look at the camera, and tell me your name and what you do.
pardon?
Tell me your name and what you do into the camera.
Can I just say Shlee? I don't like. I'm gonna change it
Tell me your
soon.
name.
My name's Shlee Binesi, and I'm an artist. And I'm 22 years old. And I live by myself. And I'm still learning tons about myself and life and people around me.
Perfect.